Perfect. With that, there being a quorum and it being shortly after 10 o'clock, I will call to order the Peninsula RPTO Executive Board meeting of April 16th. For those of you who are new, we typically start our meetings. I will do introductions by what I see on my screen. And we do that so that anyone viewing our video understands or knows the identification of our members. So with that, looking at my screen, Ed Coviello is with Kitsap Transit and one of the RPTO's coordinators. I'm Beck Ashby. I am with a council member of the city of Port Orchard. Thera Black is the RPTO Peninsula, the coordinator for us. David Fort just picked up his phone and he's with Kitsap County. Lindsay Schwarem Warren is a council member with the city of Port Angeles. And I just go right through your name now, Lindsay. I've got it down, so we're good. Dick Taylor, I'm not seeing a picture, but Dick is with the Port of Shelton. And Dick, we are all sympathetic with the fire you had this week and trust everything is fine down in your neck of the woods. Dina Gessler, Dina Gessler is with OLICAP, I believe. And Rachel Anderson, I don't know that we've met before. I apologize if we have, but she's with the city of Sequim. She is Dennis Smith, only she's Rachel Anderson now. And we have Wendy Clark Getson, who is with Jefferson County and is the chair of our Technical Advisory Committee. John Clausen is the executive director of Kitsap Transit. Marty, have you lost weight? You're looking really thin there. Marty is with the Skokomish tribe. And we have Kate Dean with Jefferson County. Randy Netherland, Mason County Commissioner. Sarah Crouch is with Jefferson Transit and is our fiscal agent. And we have Mike, where did I get Ron? Mike, Ringenberg with Mason Transit. And then we have the troublemaker of all troublemakers, Dennis Engel from Washington State Department of Transportation. Ariel Spieser from the city of Port Townsend, Annette Nessie with the Jamestown S'Klallam tribe, Steve Gray with Clallam County, Casey Duff, I believe, is a representative from Maria Cantwell's office. Casey, we've not met. We're glad to have you here this morning. And my screen just changed. Tammy Rupert is the executive director of Jefferson Transit. Brandon Myers is here representing Clallam Transit, I believe. Mike, there's Ed Stern, absolutely. The city of Paulsbo. Mike Kluntz is with the city of
Good job, congratulations to us. Hopefully Robert will send out a survey monkey again through his secretary and put something together for us in about 3 months. I'll remind him in a week.
And Cliff Hall is with the Department of Transportation. That is everyone. Did I miss anyone?
Beck, I joined late. This is Penny from Squaxin.
Oh, tribe. There's Penny. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's with the Squaxin tribe?
Correct.
Perfect. So with our introductions, our audience now knows who we all are and who we represent. And we have the agenda. Randy, did you get the agenda? Is the agenda fine? Are there any additions or anything we would like removed from the agenda today?
Madam Chair, I move for approval of the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Randy.
Second.
Thank you, John. And again, if you're new, we typically do not do a roll vote. I just ask if there is anyone who is wishing to vote against the motion. Is there anyone who wishes to vote against the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved with unanimous consent. We have basically two consent items on our agenda. One is the approval of the minutes from our February 19th meeting, and then our third quarter invoice.
To
Is
approve
there,
the consent agenda as presented.
thank you, Ed.
This is Kate. I'll second.
Thank you, Kate. It has been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Is there anyone who would be wishing to vote against that motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would prefer to vote against the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved with unanimous consent. So now we will go down. We have two action items this morning. We will go down to the amendment to the procurement policy. And we found just a little minor thing in there that we thought we needed to make an amendment. So Sarah, I will let you do that discussion.
Sure, thank you. Good morning, everybody. This is a really a housekeeping amendment to your procurement policy. You adopted it in February 2020, to get my years right. And when we went to execute our very first contract as PRTPO, we realized that the procurement policy is silent as to how the board approves the actual execution of the contract. And so what this amendment does is simply inserts an additional phrase into section 3 that clarifies that that responsibility of the board to authorize the chair to execute a contract. And so you have that there. You can see the whole policy in your packet as presented. And because we feel that this is a pretty minor amendment, we're not taking this over the course of 2 meetings. That's why we're not bringing it to you for a first reading and then back in June for action. We're asking, if possible, if you could act on this in a single meeting today. And so with that, I turn it over to you for your questions, discussion, and whatever action you would take.
Is there any questions on the proposed amendment? Is there any concern about seeing the amendment and voting on it in one meeting rather than our normal process of 2 meetings? Okay, seeing none and seeing no questions.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would like to make a motion to approve the PRTPO, I can't speak today, procurement policy adjustments that we just did.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll
Do we have a
second that.
second?
Brendan Meyer.
Oh, thank you, Brendan. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, we have a motion before us for an amendment to the procurement policy. It has been, and that particular authorization says the Peninsula RPT Executive Board shall review the contract and supporting procurement documentation prior to authorizing the chair to execute any contract for services. Is there anyone that would be inclined to vote against this motion? Is there anyone, I ask again, that would be inclined to vote against this motion? Hearing none, the authorization to move forward with the amendment to the procurement policy is passed with unanimous consent. So our next action item is a contract authorization for the electrical vehicle planning services. And Sarah, are you or Ed taking that?
I'll start off and then Ed can fill in any things that I might miss here. At your last meeting in February, we came to you with a request to obtain an end of biennium small services contract. And the intent of it was to help us sort of build a foundation for some RTP, Regional Transportation Plan follow-up work that will get underway starting in the next fiscal year. This contract would help us sort of establish a baseline understanding of the work that has been done before by all of our members, as well as other stakeholders in the region, as well as key initiatives or funding opportunities at the state or federal levels or from the private sector that we would want to be aware of as we get started as a region, thinking about how do we increase the electric vehicle readiness, if you would, of our regional transportation system. So we, the board, you approved us to move forward with doing that, to obtaining those services. Because it's a microservices contract, according to our PRTPO policy, we did not have to go out to bid, but Ed and I, we reached out a couple of different venues. It's a tiny contract. So one of the people that we reached out to said, thinks it's a great project and all that, just kind of too small to figure out how to make that work. But then we went to a guy named Mike Usen with DKS. He's really well known in Washington State for his expertise. And in fact, he is on a project team that Island RTPO pulled together to help them develop an electric vehicle infrastructure plan, and it came highly recommended from them. He actually was on 2 different project teams. That's sort of kind of who he is. And so Ed and I reached out to him, fingers crossed that our budget limit would not be an issue. And he is just one of those people who's really passionate about electric vehicles and what he calls electromobility. And so we talked with him. He felt that we could work together, tap his more expensive time for the kinds of expertise that we don't have. And then we'll just do some of the legwork, to figure out how to make this work. And we're really excited about this. We've already started to do some reaching out based on feedback from him. Even though he's not under contract, he's already giving us ideas and pointing us in direction. So anyways, we were excited about the opportunity to work with him. In your packet, we provided the procurement documentation associated with the policy. You also have in there the draft contract that actually using PRTPO's brand new contract template. So you have a draft contract associated with this, as well as a resolution memorializing your action, if assuming that you authorize us to go ahead and execute this. That would be the action we would be looking for from you today, is to authorize or approve resolution 02-2021, authorizing the chair to execute the contract. If approved, we would initiate that today. They would be under contract by early next week. The work needs to conclude by the end of June and be invoiced almost immediately thereafter, because this is end of year biennium funding. So I'm happy to answer any questions or get into specifics on sort of the scope of work details that we've talked about, but I'd turn it over to you really for your questions, your discussion, and ultimately ask for your action on this, please.
And Tara, I want to add one thing. The scope of work does include a presentation to the board here in June.
That's great. Thank you.
Kate?
Thank you. Quick question for you, Chair Ashby. Do you prefer us to physically hold up a hand or do the raise hand function in Zoom? Do you have a preference?
I do not have a preference. As we're getting so that we have a larger audience, so it's a little harder for me. So if you raise your hand, you move to the front of my screen. However, if you wave or even unmute yourself, normally I can recognize you.
Okay, great, thank you. So question for Athera, I believe, is so a lot of the work being done in my community on electrification is not necessarily through government or through transit. So what would be the best way for us to provide input on important stakeholders?
We've already started to do some outreach, and in fact, I've got some good information from NODC along those lines. So it's easiest for us because we already have relationships with you as our members. But if you can put us in touch with the people we need to be talking to in terms of other stakeholders, and we're thinking that these are going to be organizations, like NODC, but also, or there might be PUDs doing work. There may be public-private partnerships doing work. Tribes may be doing work that we're just not asking the right people. You know, it might be coming up out of enterprise services, as you know, the enterprise commercial division instead of planning. We're casting a really big net right now. So please, if you've got ideas, reach out to me. We'll you know, there's no bad contacts at this point.
Great, thank you. I fully support this contract. It does seem like a lot of work for a small amount of money. So I'm grateful that the contractor is willing to do that.
Yeah, both of us.
Yes, Brendan.
Yeah, just curious, is this going to give us the ability, especially in the EV space, there's so many competing technologies, to really dwindle down what like the best technology moving forward is? I know this with other things, it's really easy for government to jump in late in the game and adopt technology that's on its way out, or that's not going to be, you know, useful in 5 years from now. So like it comes to, when I think about it, because there's a lot of talk about wireless charging for EV cars. You know, they pull up into space and it's just charging from underneath the car. So I just want to make sure that this, you know, they're aware of that, and that's really what I want to look forward to.
Yeah, he's very aware of that. He's already, I mean, we've even talked about the importance of perhaps hydrogen-powered EV batteries. That's a technology that's really advancing rapidly in California, just starting to be introduced in Washington. The stuff, those of you with airports, I had not really thought about the aircraft, literally flying cars that are being tested by and licensed right now by FAA. You know, he's got us thinking about electric vehicle systems in ways, and so I don't want to say that we're going to tell you the answer to your question. What we're doing is developing a repository that will help you best, you know, quickly find the answer to the question that you have, I guess I should say. And that he's helping us so that if Ed and I were doing this ourselves, we would start at the beginning and we'd be going through all that old technology. He's the guy who's kind of got his finger on the pulse of what's happening now. So we're hoping the intent of this is to skip over the old generation stuff that's no longer relevant and really focus on what's relevant going forward. And this is the guy with insights into that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Is there anyone else with a question or comments?
I have a comment. I just want to say real quick. I know that I didn't know, but till last week, but the Lucky Dog Casino put in, I think there's 4 new level 2 stations for charging electric cars there. So just wanted to throw that out there.
I will be following up with you, Marty. We're just trying to pull all this information together. And so I'll circle back with you and have you point me to the right person.
Okay.
But that shows how important it is that even in Hoodsport, they're putting in charging stations. So
Great.
yeah, we applaud the tribe for doing that.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions regarding the EV planning services?
I have a quick question. This is Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, I'm new, so I'm still learning acronyms. So I was curious what SFY stood for and DKS.
Sure. So, sorry about that. Yeah. So SFY is state fiscal year. And the reason why that matters is that our funding is on a state fiscal year basis. So we're going to start our new budget year in July. So we're using up the end of biennium funding that evaporates if it's not used. And then DKS is, I could not tell you what that's the name of the firm. I don't know what the initials stand for, but they're just known by DKS. So, and they do a lot of transportation engineering and planning, and I think a lot of other stuff too in the Washington state and elsewhere.
Awesome, thank you so much.
And Rachel, for your information, we function on a 2-year biennial budget, and we are totally funded by the state of Washington. None of our organizations pay any dues. So, and then if we have any unused money, it goes away at the end of the budget cycle. So we start looking in January or February, are we going to have extra money? Are we going to need money? And that was where we determined we had $4,500 that we could spend, but we had to spend it by June 30th, and we had to invoice it during this cycle. So it's a really condensed time frame that we're working with here. So are there any other questions, Kate?
I was just going to make a motion if we're ready.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 02-2021, authorizing the PRTPO Chair to execute a $4,500 contract for services with DKS for professional support in establishing a regional inventory for EV materials and resources as per the contract.
This is Dick Taylor. I second the motion.
Thank you, Dick. We have a motion and a second to authorize the chair to execute the resolution 02-2021 in a contract with DKS for professional support in establishing the regional inventory of EV materials and resources. Is there anyone that would be inclined to vote against that motion? I would ask a second time, is there anyone who would be inclined to vote against that motion? Hearing none, the motion passes with unanimous consent. So we're excited to get that work started. And now that concluded our action items, but now we're to discussion items, and we will talk about our UPWP. And again, Sarah, I believe let me just start by saying this, the UPWP this year, we've decided to do a 2-year UPWP and a 2-year budget. In the past, we have always done this on an annual basis, but it is time consuming, and it seems more appropriate to lay out a 2-year work plan. And so that was what the executive committee asked of our coordinators, to put together a 2-year plan and a 2-year budget. And I must say, well, which you read, but we already knew, that the financial commitment from the state has been reduced by approximately $30,000 for the biennium, or $15,000 for annually. So that has required us to have a fairly vanilla UPWP, and I will let Sarah explain what is in the UPWP.
And just for the record, vanilla is awesome, and it's a great base for all kinds of good toppings. So yes, it's a vanilla UPWP, but I think it'll serve you well. This is, for the benefit of those who are new this year, building a little bit more on what Beck was saying, the UPWP is required by WSDOT. They give us money to carry out requirements of RCW 4780. And one of the requirements associated with receiving that funding is that we develop a work program, for all transparency, to say, here's what we think we're going to be doing over the next now 2 years of work with this money. We have certain requirements laid out in state law that we must accomplish. Distilled down, it is to maintain, to update and maintain a long-range regional transportation plan, or RTP. And that is actually a big driver in our work program as we work to implement that regional plan. We're required to have a human services transportation plan, which we're going to talk about a little bit later too. That is a plan that brings together the public and nonprofit and private service providers who meet the mobility needs of our most vulnerable residents. And so we update that every 4 years and maintain that. We have a responsibility to maintain a regional transportation improvement program. And so you'll see that spoken to directly in there. And then we also have some responsibilities in terms of funding, where we are involved in allocating federal transportation funds to projects. So there's certain things that are laid out in state statute that we must do. And then it's up to PRTPO as to how to do those. And so that's really reflected in this UPWP. We've organized it similar to the way we did in the current year that we're in now, with 4 different task areas. The first 3 of those task areas really are focused on those mandatory things, what we must do in order to satisfy state requirements for an RTPO. And then the 4th task area, which this year has no budget associated with it, or in this draft plan has no budget associated with it, are for activities sort of above and beyond the core program or discretionary things that the board identifies as priorities that it would like to undertake with resources. Going into this next 2-year UPWP, we cannot at this moment in time say that we will have a lot of extra resources. We don't know where those resources will come from. As we looked at the budget cut, the funding levels, I don't even want to call it a budget cut, but the funding levels for these next 2 years, it seems that that is sufficient to take care of the core program. We believe that we will actually be able to deliver the core program more efficiently than what we've laid out. We're hoping that like our second time through or third time through on some of these things, we're achieving some efficiencies. And so we believe that we will have some resources available in this next 2-year period that the board can direct to special activities that you think are important. I just can't tell you at this point how much money that will be and when that will be. So, but the nature of the UPWP is such that you can change it, you can amend it and modify it once it's adopted. So that's why we come to you confident that there will be opportunities in the next 2 years to identify things that, as a board that you feel would really benefit the region that we're not identifying with a budget right now, but we'll be able to update that later. So it's a really important part of your responsibility to oversee the budget and to direct the work program. And so that's why we want you to be comfortable with this and be familiar with what it is and why it has what it has in it and why it doesn't have other things. One of the other things that it has in it is back in Appendix A is a list of unfunded needs. Now that's an interesting list and it's more of a strategic list than anything else. That list is really helpful at the end of the biennium if WashDOT has extra funds available that won't be spent. By some regions, they redirect them to projects elsewhere. So several regions in Washington state got some of these projects funded in February or March of this past year, or, a couple months ago. As a result of this, we were not in a position to do that at this point, but we will flesh this out, this list out more with you, ideas that come up from you today. And then we're also taking it to the TAC in May to have them help flesh this out. And so when you see this again, that list will be probably a little bit longer, and even the projects that are in there might be refined a bit the next time you see it. But I wanted to point that out. It's part of the UPWP, but it's those are unfunded activities that are identified there. Besides that, I think it's pretty self-explanatory as a document. We don't get brownie points by coming up with something new and exciting and original every year. So those of you who were here last year, you look at this and you go, this looks kind of familiar. So the first part of it sort of gives you an introduction to the region. And then as you get into it, you see the work program. So I think with that, I would turn it over to you for any questions or discussion or ideas that you might have, especially if you've got ideas on unfunded needs. We will be bringing it back to you at your next meeting in June for action, and at that time, and then it would go into effect July 1. So with that, I turn it over to you for questions or discussions, or I should also say, Ed, if there's anything that I left out that we should add in there too, let me know.
I think you got it. It's I love the 2-year format. It really gives us a lot more flexibility going forward.
And we do hope to find some efficiencies, because for those of you who are new to this executive board, for 30 plus years, our organization, our lead planning agency was the Washington State Department of Transportation. And we moved away from that format a couple of years ago. So we have learned, we have experience now at what we're doing. And so we've spent some time over the last couple of years doing policy work, updating our contracts. There's just been a lot of behind the scenes things that we've had to do. And so we were very fortunate that we did have the extra money during the last couple of years to complete that necessary actions, but we should have some efficiencies now moving forward. What we do, what the process is the UPWP is presented to you at this meeting. If you don't have any major changes or recommendations or concerns for us, we will forward it to DOT, and we have a meeting scheduled for them week after next. And then they will tell us if it's acceptable to them or if they need any adjustments or any additions to it. And then we bring it back to you in June for final approval. So with that, are there any particular comments or questions or concerns about it? And then I'm going to put people on the spot because that's what I love to do. And I'm going to ask Dennis or Cliff, because they've had an opportunity to look at this. Is there anything that you see that we've missed or anything that you just at first glance think we need to do a little differently?
I'll throw one thing out there that jumped out at me, the UPWP budget and funding by work element table that you have there. It needs an extra 0 on the line 3, the regional TIF for 2023.
Okay.
The numbers work. It just,
Thank you. Had to
Thank
put
you.
something in there to see if anybody was paying attention. Dennis got it today. Extra donuts, Dennis.
Hear me or see me. I can't see me or hear me, but
Okay, I can hear you, Cliff. Cliff, you forgot to shave this morning.
I did. Yeah. It was just one day's growth.
Okay.
No, I haven't actually taken a look at it, so I don't really have an opinion at this point. But if it's close to what it was last year, I'm sure it's fine. I mean, we have, every year there's new emphasis areas and that kind of thing. So we'll just take a good look at it. And
Okay,
I
thanks.
don't expect any major changes, but appreciate the opportunity to do this. So
Thanks. Is there anyone else that would like to comment or ask questions? Oh, Kate, please.
And I am new to this board also, so bear with a rookie question, please. But whenever I think of, the opportunity to make a list for when there are extra funds, I take that very seriously. I'm curious if there's been any work done, and other counties might feel less of the constraint we are of, I think particularly with the Hood Canal Bridge, seeing at times of high visitorship and tourism, of course, being important to our economy, really looking to see if there are ways that we can be promoting transit and reduce trips, individual car trips, when we're getting a lot of traffic, particularly summer weekends. So just curious, has there been any work done? And I'm thinking of the work that we did currently are doing with Jefferson Transit, using Google metadata, looking at where we can now identify the major trips, the trips that the most people are doing. It's using technology. We can now see there are tens of thousands of people doing this exact trip. Is there a way to be to use that data to provide service and be sure that they're connecting services to get at least a handful of folks out of cars. So just curious if there any kind of placeholder for that kind of regional planning, specifically to relieve congestion. And of course, there's life safety concerns with that congestion as well. But I think that's gonna be a kind of next generation in planning. And do we have anything in the pipeline to start thinking along those lines?
Kate, can I ask a follow-up question, or maybe it's adding to that, and maybe it's a question to, especially the transit agencies. Has there been any discussion about transit priority somehow? You know, in that really important interregional connection there, intercounty connection. Because when I think about the congestion stacking up, that's just got to be a huge impact on transit agencies relying on that. And I don't know the answer to that at all, if anybody's looked at that.
Yeah, I would certainly defer to Tammy and the other transit folks here, but in our strategic planning, that's where we're looking at this data, you know, that's all coming off of our smartphones that shows that, you know, humans are surprisingly predictable, and how can we be improving transportation, you know, using that data. But Tammy, you're deeper in the weeds than I am.
Yeah, we're right. We're technically right in the middle of our comprehensive plan, and they did use the streetlight data off of our cell phones to determine where people are coming and going from. And we're also right in the middle of a electric vehicle feasibility study. We kind of got hung up a little bit at the PUD, and that's where we're at. So I'll be reporting that to the board on Tuesday. And so as far as a plan, we're right in the middle of creating something, some kind of regional plan, some kind of long-term plan to reduce the single occupancy vehicles. But we're not there yet. I don't know, John, do you have anything else?
No, not really. We're kind of in the same boat. We're looking at our long-range plan and updating it, and you know, have some of the same issues.
Mm-hmm.
Lindsay?
Yeah, so I guess Brendan and I are both Clallam Transit and City of Port Angeles. So I guess I'm speaking more Clallam Transit here, but it all ties together because throughout our whole region, we have a lot of land use patterns that are very individual automobile dependent. And we've got state, federal, international, and local greenhouse gas emission goals that are not going to be met with the land use patterns that we have unless we innovate in our technologies like what Commissioner Dean is talking about. I think we're talking about first mile, last mile micromobility solutions in Clallam Transit's comprehensive operational assessment that's currently ongoing. And I think for Hood Canal Bridge connection, certainly expanding the straight shot is high in the priority list for Clallam Transit. But that's about, I think, as much as I can speak to it, except I think this is one of the primary goals that we should have in the immediate near term.
Well, not to make this all about us, but it is about us at this point. We are looking at those types of things as well, connecting with the straight shot, going to Kingston, you know, and connecting with the fast ferries. That's a heavy subject that we're dealing with right now, and how to do that. And right now during this time, it's been particularly difficult. It's hard to predict ridership in this time because we can't predict when when COVID's gonna lighten up a little bit. But those are things that we are seriously looking at. What's transit gonna look like when this is all over? And we've been working together as a regional transportation team. I guess we're just maybe not bringing that to this group as much as we are bringing it to each other. Thoughts? Questions?
I have something I would like to say about this. It's been a few years since I graduated back in 2013 I went back to University of Michigan for my engineering degree. And I just want to say that they have a pretty good handle on their technology on their University of Michigan buses, and they probably would have a lot of good ideas if anybody ever wanted to reach out to them, maybe for some information or whatever. But it was really cool. You could see where the buses were and when they were going to arrive at your stop and everything on your iPhone or whatever smartphone you had or whatever. So it's just a thought I had.
That's a really good direction too, and something that Jefferson Transit has been struggling with. We have route match, and we wanted to get what's called route shout, and it's not happening because of our internet services. It is just been a nightmare over the last couple of years trying to make that system work. But Marty, you're right on. That's what people want also, is they want to know where their bus is at any moment. So, we keep moving forward in that direction. We're looking at another option at this point.
Another option that some other nations do is big destinations. They tend to have a conglomerate group that has buses traveling to the main tourism areas during the summer. If I'm in Seattle, I can book a straight ticket, maybe to Cambridge Island, and get on one of these special buses that goes to the area in the peninsula where they have thousands of people going to. And that way I don't have to, transfer and hop and do all this of the one-stop shopping. Now that's very expensive. And sort of the question is, who would be the lead on such a system?
Yeah.
When I think about what PRTPO can do, let me ask if this would have value to you all. Like, I'm just professionally, I'm involved with like the Transportation Research Board and the activities there. Do you all feel like you have access to like the latest thinking or the latest research or the latest examples on stuff? Or is that something that we could build I'm just off the top of my head, I'm going to say like a resource portal, an information portal on the website, on the PRTPO website, that you all could, like what Marty was just talking about, the University of Michigan buses, we could find the link to that resource and put it there, that you all, could access it if it's relevant to you, and if it's not, we're not shoving it down your throat. Is that something, when I think about what we can offer you to help you do what you do in all of your different capacities, is that something that would be helpful to you? Or do you feel like professionally you've got your fingers on the pulse of what's, the cutting edge technologies for your sectors? What do you think?
Brendan has his hand up again, I believe.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to just see what the potential of like a carbon emission reduction benefits we could really showcase when talking about these from Clallam to Jefferson and these different straight shot type we're reducing cars coming out of the peninsula when we do this, and what kind of benefits do we have or we can receive from cutting that reducing those emissions, and like sort of just getting rid of that extra carbon footprint, if there is incentives to help give each of our own projects potentially more money or something in that regards.
It sounds to me like you've brought forth some very good ideas, and my recommendation would be that we vet these a little more at the TAC meeting and refine them a little more. But I do see opportunity for us to work together. And then on a lighter note, I was going to say that we could eliminate a lot of the problems with the Hood Canal Bridge if John would just take one of his fast ferries out to the peninsula.
Hear, hear.
Actually, ironically, working on something with Washington State Ferries, because DOT is going to be working on the bridge. And
Oh,
there's going to be some weekends that are going to be shut down, but it is primarily just to move their ferry crews from Kitsap up to Port Townsend so that they can have their Port Townsend boat running.
Kate?
This is somewhat in response maybe to Thera's question and your recommendation. Poor Tammy has to deal with me on her transit board. I think even chairing the transit board now, saying like, where are the innovations in rural transit? And, not feeling like it's not easy to find. And in being involved in the legislative session this year on some transportation bills, same thing. I mean, members of the legislature saying, where are the sweet spots for innovation in rural transit? And, looking at I know that House transportation package much better than I do the Senate one, but I mean, they're putting funding aside for programs. They know that they have to address rural issues, especially in looking at any sort of carbon tax options. And so whether it's through the TAC, whether it's through another project in that Appendix A, but like I would just suggest that we could potentially, and I know this is tough, but maybe a group of us could work on developing at least a framework that is in place, perhaps included on that the unified list, so that if indeed there were funds to start creating these rural models, that we'd be in a good position to potentially pilot something.
I wanted to say something else too.
Okay, Marty.
I know it's a long commute, but I commute from Cosmopolis out there by Aberdeen out here to Skokomis Tribe for work every day because my partner, she inherited a house from her father that passed away, and it helps save on rent, but the gas money is ridiculous to go back and forth to work. It's like almost an hour and a half commute every day from each way. And if I could catch a bus and get out here to by Skokomis or even like to the Twin Totem store on 101, I would catch a bus every day to work, if I could. But I would have to go from Aberdeen Transit, and then they have a bus that goes to Olympia. Then I would have to catch a bus to Olympia that goes out to, it connects with the Mason Transit out at right near the casino out in Squaxin Tribe, what is that, Little Creek Casino. They have a store right there that where you can connect from the transit from Olympia to Mason Transit. Then I would have to go from there down to downtown Shelton. Then I would have to catch a bus out here from Lake Cushman. But if there was like a straight shot bus that would go, right through 101 and then come out towards Port Angeles or whatever, I would get in that bus every day to go to work, instead of driving. But there's really no options for me to do that, so I have to commute every day. I just want to throw that out there in case there would ever be any new routes that were long distance, and that would be nice, I think. Just something to throw out there again. Thank you.
I'm going to make two comments, and these are just things that I've noticed, kind of to support what Marty was saying. I think it's very important for our group to support Jefferson Transit's West Route area, because that's what closes the loop around the Olympic Peninsula. And we can't forget that when we're doing funding. I have always found that a critical piece for people to move via transit all the way around the peninsula. The other thing that I'm going to mention, listening to Marty, and because I live in Port Orchard, we're not quite as rural as some of the other areas, but the Suquamish tribe had an unfortunate accident a couple years ago, or a couple weeks ago, and one of their elders was killed as a pedestrian. So I think there's a lot of rural safety issues that we as a group can take up also. Yeah, we just do. Most of your roads are rural, and there has to be yeah, there has to be some way to make those safer for pedestrians. Anyway, what I would like to do at this point in the interest of time is Sarah, I know, is a copious note taker. And so she will bring this to TAC, to the technical folks, and they will refine it and we will look at it more. Everything we're talking about is pretty much going to go into Appendix A. And I like the idea of a subcommittee. I have absolutely no problem with that. But we do have to have funds to staff it. So we need to look at some of those other issues before we actually move forward with it. I mean, if it's in Appendix A and we get additional funding, we can fund it. But if we want to move forward with it before there's any additional monies, we would have to figure out how to be more efficient in other areas to support that work. So with that, we will bring the UPWP back in June for your approval.
Back, if I may, I think Mike had his hand up throughout that.
Oh, I didn't see that. Yes, please, Mike.
Yeah, I'm just, thank you, John. I got a simpler question or a simpler problem for you. Is there's so much different information out there with all the different COVID rules and everything else. I've been trying to get an answer as far as we're in phase 3 now. Can we increase our ridership on our buses? Because some of our passengers get left at stops because I can only put 9 people on a 35-foot bus by the rules of COVID. But on an airplane, you can pack it all the way full and they're on there for 5 or 6 hours. But if somebody riding 15 minutes down the road, I can only have 9 people on a bus. Every agency seems to be doing something different, but everybody's doing something different, which makes it tough on passengers because if they get on one system and they're not counting passengers, they get on my system where we're counting to 9, then they're going to get left because I only have so many ride recovery people I can send back out there. So that's been my challenge lately, just something even simpler than creating new routes is just when can I increase my ridership? And I'm at the point now where I'm just going to be like, hey, starting Monday, we're going to increase the ridership to whatever the number is going to be because we're losing passengers and people are now driving their cars because I can't put them on a bus, but I can put them on an airplane doing the exact same thing, which is crazy to me. So I think the rules and the information out there, there's so much of it, it's hard to decipher what's real anymore. And then if we're going to go backwards in our phases, what does that mean to us too? I mean, we're going to go back to putting 3 people on a bus or, 30 people. I mean, that's kind of where I'm at right now is I'm struggling to try to keep up daily with the numbership and ridership based on what our numbers are now. And we're losing passengers because of some of the rules we're doing to ourselves.
That's not good. John?
My understanding, Mike, is that at least for Kitsap, we're still governed by the governor's rules, regardless of whether we're in phase 2 or 3, and still 3-foot separation. And that's pretty much what we're following until the governor changes it.
And Tammy is also nodding agreement with that.
Sorry, I couldn't get my mute button off quick enough. That's exactly what we're doing as well until we hear differently.
Yeah, our challenge is when we run into Olympia, they're not counting passengers on the buses. So we run in there with 7 or 8 or 9, and then we try to put 10 on the bus coming back, and the driver's saying, no, we're following the rules. But when other systems don't play by the rules, or I heard now that King County is going to go to 50% capacity. So it's hard when everybody has a different set of rules. The passengers are really confused and upset right now with us because we're not following intercities rules and stuff like that. So it's like, holy cow. That's not helping our case as far as trying to get people out of their cars.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the dialogue this morning. It was very informative, very useful. And I believe that when we come back in June, we will have some ideas formulated a little better from your comments this morning. Great. I really like the idea of circular around the peninsula. I think Lindsay had put something in there about that. That was a great comment. But we will go on to the biennial bylaws review. And according to our bylaws, we are required to review them every 2 years. And so this is the year we would do that. We have scheduled, I believe it's 10 o'clock on May 5th, which I think is a Wednesday maybe, to have a subcommittee to review the bylaws. I have reviewed the bylaws myself. We did a very thorough update of the bylaws when we did the transition from DOT as our lead planning agency to our new format. We met regularly, I'm going to say for about 4 months, did the interlocal agreement and the bylaws. I think they're fairly current. There is one area that needs adjustment, and that is under the role of the executive committee. And in that particular section, it says that we will have certain policies, one of which is a policy for drafting and adopting the UPWP. Well, we haven't done that policy yet. So it made me realize we need to get that policy together, but we don't have it does not mention a policy for amending UPWPs. So that's one thing that I saw that we would maybe want to update our bylaws to include. However, there may be other issues that other people would like to bring forward. So we're going to have a meeting on May 5th, 10 o'clock. It will be Zoom, a subcommittee for the bylaws. I don't think the meeting will be require a great investment of your time. But I'm opening that up. Is there, if anyone wants to volunteer to be on that committee, let Sarah or myself know. And also you can just show up because we will just send out a blanket invitation. Is that correct, Sarah?
We can, sure.
Okay. Yeah, we do need a few people to attend, however. So, Sarah, do you have anything else to say on the bylaws?
No, I think you all did this is before I got here, you all did a really good job on those bylaws. We went through them and just to get a sense of how much time we might be asking a subcommittee to put into this. And this is a easy subcommittee gig. I think it's a pretty straightforward one.
Yeah, I think it is fairly straightforward, but it does have to be done. So we're asking for your participation. Wendy, do you have a comment or question?
Yes, I was going to ask, for the sake of the new people at our meeting today, could you describe the policy board in our bylaws, how it's sort of in essence, it's a part of our past and potentially part of our future?
I'm not sure I understand the question. The Transportation Policy Board?
Yes, in our bylaws, it stipulates that there's a whole nother group called the policy board.
Correct, and that's part of the RCW. And is Dina still here, or did she have to leave yet? By the RCW, we have an executive board, which is all of us. And we also have a transportation policy board. We have, and other members can be part of the transportation policy board, such as Dina, members of the a Chamber of Commerce. Anyone that's interested in transportation planning can all be members of the Transportation Policy Board. We have elected or chosen over the years to hold those meetings concurrently. Our Executive Board and our Transportation Policy Board meet at the same time. When it becomes time to take a vote, only Executive Board members vote. The Transportation Policy Board is a recommending body only. But rather than having two separate meetings, we have combined them over the many years into just one meeting. Does that satisfy you, Wendy?
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation of what is it doing in our bylaws. It's part of the RCW, and it is part of our past that we had people sitting around the table that wouldn't vote, but they were very much included
right in
the discussion.
Right, and that's right, and we've just elected not to have two separate meetings. So, and that again, that's all in the bylaws. So we would particularly welcome people who are new that haven't had an opportunity or that were not part of the group when we originally developed the bylaws or updated them a couple of years ago. It would be a great time for them to be very familiar with our bylaws. So with that, please expect an invitation to attend that meeting on May 5th. Is there any other comments or questions about the bylaws? I know most of you worked on them diligently, so. Okay, thank you. We will go down now to a first reading of a draft public participation protocol. And Sarah, I believe that is you also.
Well, that's me. This is in 2014, PRTPO adopted a public participation plan. And what it did is laid out sort of the means, the techniques by which PRTPO would engage with its various publics and make its materials accessible and available. That was very out of date, and we needed to update it. The draft in front of you is written in a little more user-friendly language and is organized a little bit differently, but hits pretty much the same things that needed to be hit before, but and brings things more current. We opted, floating this for you, for your consideration, opted to call it public participation protocols just because thinking about the public, long-range regional planning is confusing enough as is. And when we have a regional transportation plan, that's clearly a plan, and we have a human services transportation plan that's clearly a plan, and then a public participation plan that's more like a policy than a plan, it just seemed confusing, and yet a policy means something. So we're trying the language of public participation protocols, and what it does is just lays out the, how we think about reaching out to the public. It says that when we do something like one of our big plans, a real plan, that those will have a separate standalone process for that, that will be developed as a part of that. It says that we are looking to make our meetings as inclusive as we can, and in a large, sprawling, highly rural region such as this, that technology is a powerful tool, but we also are cognizant that there are barriers that presents as well. It also spells out and says that these are what we aspire to do, but the reality is we have a very small budget and limited staff capacity. And so it says this is what we strive for. This is sort of like our philosophy about how we're approaching it. We'll hit all of these as much as we can, but if we are unable to fully live up to our expectations, it does not invalidate the decisions that you make. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I think most of you in your own organizations have something somewhat similar. This is not our Title VI plan. That is an entirely separate document, and you will see an update of that draft at your next meeting. This is more of our general statement to all of our stakeholders as to how we want to engage with them and the means by which we'll go about that. So I would look for any questions, suggestions, concerns on your part, and then we would be bringing this back to you in June to approve and replace the old public participation plan with whatever comes out of this. So with that, I turn it over to you for any questions or discussions that you might have.
Are there any discussions, questions on the public participation protocol? I too thought it was fairly self-explanatory. I felt that it covered most everything that we do or would hope to do. Wendy, is that a new hand raised? Or is that an old hand raised? Okay. If you do, after you review the public participation protocol further and have questions, do not hesitate to contact Sarah, myself, or Ed we would be glad to offer any explanations or incorporate any ideas you have. And with that, we will move this forward to June for approval. And I want to compliment Dina. I think she now has her second COVID shot. Good job. So the next discussion item is the update of our local agency support and use of federal funds. Sarah, were you taking that?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you all an update. Back in December, you directed us to pursue some different options for supporting our local agencies who must use federal funds on their projects. And really, especially for the benefit of our newer members, this is very specific to federal highway funding. I think our transit agencies have a really good handle on how the FTA funds work, but federal highway funds are really different, and they tend to have a disproportionate impact on our small and rural members, and makes the projects that they do very challenging. And so the board identified 3 measures late last year to pursue. One was training, helping obtain training for local members and how to manage a project with federal highway funding on it, particularly for technical, for staff members who do the project management. There was also a request to try to obtain flexibility, whether as a part of a pilot project or some other way, for our local agencies in the 3 rural counties in Clallam, Jefferson, and Mason counties, who must manage rural, the acronym is STBG funds, Surface Transportation Block Group Funds. It's a color of federal money that our local rural communities are responsible for managing. There are 2 provisions in those rules that we think are onerous and unnecessary, and it's at the state's discretion to change those rules. It's not a federal rule. One of those has to do with the requirement that these 3 rural counties, when they administer these funds, that they achieve a split, that a minimum amount of money goes into projects located on rural facilities, a minimum amount of money goes into projects located on urban facilities, and then the rest of the money could be spent anywhere. That is a very problematic requirement when you're working with such small pots of federal funding. It's creates an onerous burden on local agencies and drives up project cost and administration cost. The other thing was to get the state to allow local agencies, if they wanted to put more than a year's worth of money onto a project and obligate it without fear that it's going to get dragged out over a period of years. The training is actually going to be this next Tuesday, and you all should have all the technical advisory committee and I don't know if it went to all the board. I think it went just to the technical advisory committee. Should have received or did receive invitations. This is a webinar. It's a 3-hour webinar on Tuesday afternoon, and we were unsuccessful. Timing is just not good, I don't think, this year for WashDOT to provide training. And so Loretta Swanson with Mason County informed me that APWA, the American Public Works Association, the Washington chapter, had developed some training on this exact topic. And it was presented back in February. I happen to know both of the people who provided that training, got in touch with them, and they are now reprising that training that was sort of authorized by APWA for our local partners. And then because the webinar license has 100 seats on it, we did not fill it up with our members. And so we've actually made that training available through, we reached out to the RTPOs around us and then broadened it out to the whole state to say, if you've got some small agencies, rural agencies that have to use federal funding, we can fill up our webinar until we run out of seats. They'll all benefit from it. So that's on Tuesday. We're really, really excited. It exceeds my expectations for what this training was originally going to be. So we're really grateful to them to provide that to us pro bono and not without any charge at all. They are with Trantech. It's Diane Sheasley and Ruth McIntyre of Trantech Engineering. And Diane has over 20 years of experience working at the city and county levels. And Ruth has about the same amount of time working for local programs at WashDOT back when WashDOT local programs used to do a lot of this kind of training. So she brings a wealth of experience on that end, and then Diane with the local. So I think it's going to be really great for our members. We're going to pursue the other two options a little bit later this year, and we'll keep you apprised as we go. But I just felt like it had been several months, and I just wanted to give you an update on that. So if you have any questions, happy to answer. And we'll just update you periodically as things move forward.
We're all looking forward to Tuesday, and happy that we were able to get that training scheduled. And actually, you have 40 or so people signed up already, don't you?
Yeah, we had really good turnout.
Yeah, we have excellent turnout, but we have room for more. So, let's educate as many as we can.
Yeah, but I do want to clarify, it's really geared towards those who must use federal highways funding or federal lands funding. So either if all you use is FTA funding, you've probably got something better to do on Tuesday afternoon.
Okay.
Unless you need this as an excuse to go do something better.
Okay. Wendy, is that a new hand?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just wanted to compliment Sarah for pursuing this lead from Mason County and to help designing this, so it is for the ones that feel perhaps the most put upon by many different federal rules. And just to say that Jefferson County is now expanding it, be more people involved, and I think it'll be a great opportunity for networking, where you can see the participants in this virtual format and follow up on some other conversations, because we all kind of live it and breathe it, and then we try to sort of deny that it exists so we can get on with our project. But there's a lot to learn, and I'm looking forward to the new APWA curriculum. Thank you, Sarah.
Excellent. Sarah, do you want to go right into the update on the TAP funds, Transportation Alternative Funds?
Right. This is just a really quick one. And this, just about this time last year, you were going through a process to award federal transportation alternatives program funds or TAP funds to local projects. You selected 4 projects, and all 4 projects were intended to proceed in this year by August 1st. And we just wanted to let you know that the Race Street project, Port Angelis's Race Street project, has obligated, and that is a term that it means something very unique and specific in federal transportation funding parlance. But it's a very important step in securing funds and making sure they don't get swept away come August 1st by WashDOT, who would put those monies on another project. So, the Race Street project has proceeded. The other 3 are still sort of underway, but we wanted to give you that update, and just, again, the part of us keeping you updated as to what's going on. And so that's what that status update is. And Ed, I know that you had talked to Nancy. Was there anything else to add to that status update?
Not really, other than, it'll generate a STIP amendment.
Yeah.
Process.
My question is, you mentioned the Port Angeles project. The other large award we had was out at Forks in Clallam County. Is that moving forward well?
Steve, can you speak to that project?
Yes, certainly. We are still targeting getting that obligated this year. The county board just approved with our STP allocation for help us with the construction phase, another $825,000. So I got a bridge quote. So I think we're in the ballpark. So I just got to get engineering on it. I'd also say that for the Race Street project, they needed more money, and the county board awarded the city of Port Angeles at least an allocation, another $550,000 for that project. So I think the city will be able to move forward to construction this year on that project.
Yeah, that's what's generating the STIP amendment. Is that?
Those are both good news. It's Annette.
Yeah, thank you, Beck. I just wanted to clarify that the tribe has the opportunity to transfer TAP funds to federal highways under our Tribal Transportation Program agreement. And so we've done that with this planning money. And so our project is also considered obligated once that money transfers out of the TAP budget. So we're good to go.
Good, good, awesome.
That's
and just for everybody else's benefit, that is to complete the planning and right-of-way acquisition for another segment of the Olympic Discovery Trail,
right.
Heading east from Blinn. Yeah.
Correct. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, is there any more discussion on the TAP funds? I will say, Annette, I walked from your library down here a week or so ago. So anyway, I really enjoyed it. And I thought that that portion of the ODT would be particularly beautiful in the fall when the leaves all change colors.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, we will go on to our next agenda item, which is state and federal legislative updates. Do we have any updates? I know is Kate still here? She's been active in that. I'm sure John's been active. And Thera, did you have anything?
I was actually going to also recognize Casey Duff. He and I met after the March
there he is.
Development Council meeting, and he is the Peninsula Region's, he is Senator Cantwell's sort of liaison to the Peninsula region, and we invited him to come today too, even though I know we think about transportation funding as coming out of like the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. Senator Cantwell is really active on the Commerce and Environment and Public Works Committee, which also has infrastructure concerns and considerations and funding opportunities. And so we thought it might be good for everybody to hear a little bit from that side of things as well today.
And Casey, would you like to give us an update?
Yeah, thank you, Thera, for inviting me on here. It's great to see those of you who I have met before, and if I haven't, I would love to try and schedule some time to talk individually as well. My name is Casey Duff. I handle all of Pierce, Thurston, Grace Harbor, Mason, Clallam, Jefferson, and Kitsap counties for the Senator. I've been in the job for about a year now, so it's been all virtual outreach so far, but hoping to meet some folks in person coming up pretty soon. I got my first shot, which is pretty exciting. But on the federal level, I just wanted to draw attention to a couple of things. The first is that the Senator is the chair of the Senate Commerce Committee, which oversees a lot of transportation considerations. And so far, we have focused mostly on broadband, but we're expecting with the infrastructure package as it keeps moving, as talks keep happening, that we'll be able to have a lot of input over what is included in this package and in terms of the negotiations going forward. So I wanted everybody to make sure that they knew me and had my contact info, which I will share in the chat as well. As these talks start happening, please reach out to me with local considerations and concerns as you're hearing things being discussed at the federal level. It's extremely, extremely helpful for us to know what types of programs are useful for folks, what types of programmatic funding is useful. There's still ongoing talks about potential earmarks situations, and I know that that's a big rumor as well. I will share with folks as well if that gets movement in the Senate, but right now it's not booked. So we're looking mostly at a programmatic level in terms of what we can get funded and dealt with. So I will say that a lot of what the Senator is looking to accomplish revolves around public transportation and then rail and freight infrastructure as well. So these are all things that I think have a really great nexus to the peninsula. We know how critical our public transportation systems are out here, and she's told me specifically that it's frustrating for her when so much of the focus is focused on the I-5 corridor when we're talking about public transportation and things like ST3, and it's she wants to make sure that the places on the peninsula are not overlooked, and she knows that it can be frustrating at times and feel that way. So another thing that I'll make a plug for, we're talking about getting federal funding out that's already available. As you're looking to apply for grants, anybody in your organization, please let me know. We're very happy to write letters of support. We have a whole position in our Seattle office that works on grants coordination, and I will do a good job of sending out grant notices as they come out relating to transportation to Thera, and she can forward them around to your group as well if they look like they might be a good fit to folks. So really, I want to be a resource for everybody here. Don't ever hesitate to reach out. I'll put like I said, my email, my phone number in the chat. Call me, text me, shoot me an email. I try to be really responsive, and then can also connect you with our policy team in DC for more substantive questions, because I'm not a policy expert, but we have some really great folks on the Commerce Committee and the Senator's personal staff as well, who would be happy to connect you guys with folks who can really answer your questions. So I don't have a great update on where the infrastructure talks are currently standing. They are, we just got finished with a recess, and the Biden administration is pulling folks in. The Senator was at the White House earlier this week to talk infrastructure with President Biden as well. So these are all things that are going on, and I'll try and make sure to update folks as they develop. But as you're seeing things, just let me know as well. And if there's any questions anybody has right now, I'm happy to try and take a stab at them.
We really appreciate you being here. Annette, is that a new hand or an old hand up? Okay, Ed, I'm sure that you have something you want to say.
I was going to ask Casey, can you expand a little bit? I know the Senator is very involved in broadband and, with Russ Elliott in Olympia on coordinating state match funds for anticipated. So we have CARES broadband and we have ARP. And how will that benefit the rural counties, and how do you see the programs being disseminated?
That's a really great question. So a lot of what happened in CARES was standing up really quick responses to get students mostly who didn't have access online. So a lot of that money went to hotspots. It went to technology concerns. So those aren't long-term broadband solutions. We know that, and we know that those were very much patchwork kind of bills. The American Rescue Plan had a little bit more substantive things in there. One thing I will flag about one of the CARES Act is it did include $1 billion for tribal broadband expansion. So those funds are going to be starting to roll out relatively soon, I think. And we've had talks with folks and different tribal members throughout the state, and then folks who are coordinating that sort of effort at the state level in Seattle. So we're working on getting those rolled out. Really, I think the best chance we'll have to really make progress on broadband is in this next package, the infrastructure package. It's been listed in the Biden administration's priorities. The Senator certainly considers broadband critical infrastructure and certainly falls under what she wants to see done and addressed in this infrastructure package. So we're hopeful that will be a really big topic of conversation. We've had a couple of hearings. We're planning on having more. The Senator did a roundtable with folks last Friday with folks from the peninsula and then other rural areas throughout the state, just talking about the need. One of the things that I've been keeping my eye on is at the state level, the push to allow PUDs to provide internet service access. That would open up a huge amount of grant funding that is available to internet service providers at the federal level, which of course, as of now, because PUDs are not internet service providers by RCW, they don't have access to that. So really a lot of what we're looking at is how do we get that last mile laid to the really rural homes and communities that companies are not super willing to do for profit issues. So that's a big thing that we're going to try and take a stab at, I think. I'm not a policy expert, like I said, so this is what I have picked up, but like
the Hansen bill in the House and Lisa Wellman in the Senate, if they be reconciled, would give PUDs that authority. Then they could apply directly, Casey, for federal funding, which would be a big benefit to the PRTPO region.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's something that we're definitely have our eye on as well, and we want to help really anybody try and get broadband out. I mean, it's at this point with the pandemic has just shown that it is critical infrastructure. I mean, we can't really continue to have this digital divide in the way that it currently exists. So I'd be happy to, if that's something that folks on this call are interested in as well, I'm happy to share broadband updates as well.
I could jump in. This is Kate. I had to switch to phone. I could jump in just with A little bit of a legislative update, but acknowledging that things are changing by the minute, of course, here at the end of session. And I will be getting updated at noon, my next meeting, on where things currently stand. But the transit, are huge, requiring a ton of revenue and a lot of argument as to how the state is going to generate that revenue. There were proposals for 33 tax fee increases to try to cover the massive expenditures presented in both bills, and really demonstrated need to do significant transportation projects statewide. So in the final, what are we down to, 9 days of session now? They're hammering out transportation as we speak, and unclear kind of where things are going to land. I will say the House package was seen as very appealing to the Association of Engineers and Association of Counties, and had a lot of funding for local projects and community connectivity, which is exciting. So stay tuned, but I think it's really going to be down to next Sunday when session ends to see where those packages land.
Is there anyone else that has any questions or comments for Casey? Casey, we really appreciate you being here. We really appreciate you providing your contact information, and we will definitely use you as a resource. You're really value added to this group, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. I'm hoping to be able to continue to join as my schedule permits in the future too.
Yeah, that would be great. Really appreciate it. Our next agenda item, or is there any more legislative updates that anyone had, anything that may be of interest? John, you follow that pretty close. I don't know if you have
really
anything.
have much I can add.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been seeing what's going on and what's being talked about back in DC, and we're all watching the legislature closely, see what's going to come out of the state, if anything. So we're just kind of in the wait and see. Now, Casey did mention the issue of earmarks, and on the House side back there, they're talking about I forget what they call it, members' requests or something of that nature. That I know that Congressman Kilmer has been reaching out to his constituents and looking for projects that have major impacts to the community. So that's about all I could really add.
I would agree, and I would also say I think at the state level, if there isn't a transportation revenue package, there probably won't be any robust transportation projects moving forward. So yeah, we're all in a holding pattern at this point.
If I could pipe up with one thing, I've been putting out some feelers to see what WashDOT might be thinking about in terms of potential infrastructure stimulus funding. They're talking about some big numbers back in DC, and in 2009, that was the last time we had a big ARA, whatever that stood for at this point, I don't remember, funding package. I confirmed that PRTPO itself did not have a role back then in selecting projects, prioritizing and selecting projects for funding. That doesn't mean there won't be a similar role this time, but it might be a heads up to the rural counties who administer STBG funds that if the state pursues something similar to what they did before, and there are discussions going on internal, they just haven't come out to the broader community, but that there may be a need for the 3 counties or, to step up with an unexpected need to identify and prioritize funding like you had to back in 2009. So just we'll try to keep our ear to the ground. As before, there wasn't a lot of information that came out ahead of time, but we were able to glean, you know, from our various sources, sort of what the buzz was. So for some of us back in 2009, we were sort of ready for something unexpected like that. We'll do our best this time to get any insights ahead of time. And I don't think it'll be coming out with the same sort of hair on fire, must get construction projects going today kind of urgency that it had back in 2009, but it will be something, if they follow a similar approach, where the rural counties in particular will have something kind of significant pop up with probably pretty short notice and with significant ramifications for project funding in your counties. So we'll just keep you posted as we hear anything going forward, but you might start mulling that around in the back of your mind that that there may be something in the next few months where you're going to be asked to step up and fulfill a role in that capacity.
Thank you. Wendy and then Lindsay.
Thanks, Beck. I wanted to bring up with the state legislative information about fish bearer passage, that between the House and the Senate budget, there's quite a difference between the Fish Bearer Removal Board funding list, and that Jefferson County and Clallam County are caught up in the neither world of being in the one budget but not in the other.
Oh.
So we're hoping that the fish barrier budget ends up being closer to the Senate so we can see more projects built in our community for salmon and anadromous fish on our local roads.
Lindsay?
Yeah, I want to go back to Thera's comment about being ready with a bunch of projects. And as everyone knows, with smaller jurisdictions, we don't have the planning resources to plan projects that aren't about to get built. So it is plan, build, plan, build, plan, build, which creates, I think, a really big policy challenge when we try to distribute large amounts of funds really quickly into rural areas or smaller town areas. And so I guess that's a policy issue. And then I assume, Thera, that you shared that with the TAC folks, because they're the ones who are trying to decide how they can make that happen.
Yeah, and we'll bring that up with them in May. When this was just news that I got this week. So yeah, we will be involving them.
I always like it when someone makes comments that resonate so closely with all of us, but Lindsay's exactly correct. It's hard to get grants and move forward until you have the plan, but you can't do the plan unless you're pretty sure you're gonna be able to construct. So it's a chicken and egg sort of thing, to be ready, to be prepared when funding does come that we're not expecting.
And
is there anything else on the legislative update that we would like to talk about? Okay, seeing none, Thera, I will have you go ahead and give your coordinators report.
Yeah, just again, for everybody's benefit, especially the new folks, I tend to try to, I provide just a quick recap of the activities since you all last met, and then other things that we've heard about, learned about that you did not talk about today that we think might be relevant to some or all of you. And I try to, with these things, provide links to more information, and certainly they're designed in a way that you could share them freely. So that's what this is. And I tend to just highlight a couple of things and leave it to you to let me know if there's something else you want to dive into. The couple of things that I would highlight is that there is ongoing concern among local agencies about a new policy at WashDOT that as of August 1st, they will start sanctioning funds, taking monies away from local agency projects if they have not obligated, that term I was using before, if they have not obligated completely by August 1st. We're concerned about it. Ed and I are concerned about this for our region, even though it's really nothing that PRTPO has authority over, but we don't want to see our partners lose any money. It's a concern elsewhere across the state. I have also just recently learned, and some of you have actually reached out to local programs to see if there can be some leniency this go round because of, circumstances that couldn't be planned for, couldn't be accounted for, and that might delay project delivery. And you have heard that there is going to be no leniency. I've heard that this has been brought up at the legislature, and there's some legislative committees having this discussion. So I encourage you to continue proceeding as if that August 1st deadline, those monies really will be swept. But not everybody's really happy with the way it's going down. And so maybe, we'll update you if we hear anything different, because I know it's really hard for some of you to meet these deadlines. But I would proceed as if those deadlines are real, but maybe there's some relief in the wings. I've told you about the training. I'm not going to go into that again, but I will let you know, and this is actually relevant to something that Casey was talking about. We will be updating over these next couple of months something called the Freight and Goods Transportation System. And we're focusing on the roadway components of that. Rail is also a part of it, but that's not what we're being asked to provide updates on right now. The freight system is, this is part of a national designation, and it makes it easier for people like Senator Cantwell to be able to say to her committee that this particular corridor is important because it's part of a region's, it's demonstrated to be important to the region's ability to move freight. And so I think about projects like the Belfair project for Mason County with the freight corridor, Belfair Bypass Freight Corridor, SR3 Freight Corridor, and the log yard road connection into the intermodal freight facility. That's the kind of a thing that we would want to make sure shows up clearly in on a regional list of freight corridors, and there are others as well. The state handles the state system, but we'll be pinging your staff for information to help us update you. All of your jurisdictions, all of the cities and counties, and I believe ports should have received communications directly from WashDOT. I attached to the coordinator's report that correspondence that you should have received, and then we'll be bringing this to the TAC in May to get input, but I'll be pinging the different jurisdictions between now and then to make sure people are comfortable with the data request that's being made of them, and we'll try to help fill in the gaps anywhere we can. But there's certain pots of money that are only available to projects that are located on the freight and goods transportation system. So it's important that we get this right, and we'll be updating you as we go along. And I think that's about all. I just say also, please, I'll always remind you, just like Casey said, we want to support your grants. So if you've got a grant proposal coming up, don't forget to ask us for a letter of support. And also, I'm just starting to build a photo library that we can quickly pull images from that are totally representative of the region. I haven't been able to travel so much lately, so I would love help from any of you who might have good pictures of transportation that maybe you've taken through through work or whatever, that you could share, that you wouldn't mind if we use in reports and publications and on the website, just to try to show the diversity of the region, our facilities, all of that kind of stuff. If they're artsy-fartsy shots, that's great. There's a role for those as well as for project shots. So please, and I'll just remind everybody every so often, please send me any pictures that you might be willing to share for that purpose. And with that, and answer any questions that you might have about anything else on here.
Is there any questions anyone has on a report? I know that I always read it. It's always very interesting. Seeing none, I think that is all of our primary agenda items. So I would open it up for public comment. I am not seeing on my screen any public in attendance, but I would remind anyone that may be viewing this later that you can feel free to send us comments on our website through our email. And if you go to our website, PRTPO.org, you can easily leave us your comments and we will get them to our board. So with that, do we have any for the good of the order? or any updates any of our members want to give us? Annette?
Yes, thank you, Beck. I just wanted to let the PRTPO know that the Jamestown S'Klallam tribe is responding to Representative Kilmer's request for projects under the FY 2022 community project funding call. And we're proposing or working on a solution to an intersection improvement at the intersection of Sophus Road and Highway 101, which is in the vicinity of the tribe's Longhouse Market in Blinn. So this project came about over a period of time. We've been trying to address or think of the best way to address pedestrians and cyclists crossing Highway 101 at that point to get from the Olympic Discovery Trail to the Longhouse Market and other tribal amenities on that side of the road. We've looked at some trail solutions, and most recently we are looking at a roundabout on Highway 101 solution. So right now it's conceptual, although we have reached out to WSDOT and are in the process of completing an intersection control evaluation where WSDOT looks at what an entity is proposing and decides if that is a preferred alternative. The intersection control evaluation is complete. It's at WSDOT now, but they haven't formally approved it as of yet. You may have seen an article or two in the local newspapers. The Peninsula Daily News had an article and the Sequim Gazette had an article. So I just wanted to make sure the PRTPO was aware, and as this project moves forward, if it does, I can certainly update you as we make progress or not. It is does have the potential to have regional impacts, and so I want to make sure that our group is aware of what we're proposing. Happy to answer any questions.
Ed, did you have something you wanted to share?
I don't want to interrupt any questions for Annette first.
I would love to ask a question, if that's okay. This is Kate Dean via phone. I'm curious, what is your design preference at this point for a roundabout that is most pedestrian and bike friendly?
I'm sorry, Kate, I didn't hear the first part of your question.
I apologize, I am on the road. I'm curious what is your design preference in terms of a roundabout that is most pedestrian and bike friendly?
So in that ICE report, we looked at 3 alternatives. One was do nothing, one was the roundabout, and the other one was a signal, I believe. And WSDOT doesn't like signals in the middle of highways, so they're leaning toward approving the roundabout option. And the roundabout would be something that had a pedestrian cyclist crosswalk option in it, which would hopefully address that habit of folks crossing Highway 101 at that particular location.
Annette, I want to.
It's interesting. Can I just comment on that? I find it interesting that and as a multimodal transportation fan myself, I find roundabouts challenging, and I was curious to see, it was actually on Ed Stern's social media, that the new roundabout in Kitsap has a tunnel underneath, and I'm assuming for those safety reasons. So yeah, thank you for the information.
Yes, and I would just respond that we don't have the opportunity for a tunnel at that location because it's basically at sea level. So we don't have the elevations necessary to do something like a tunnel. So right now it's just a surface roundabout that's being proposed.
Annette, is there any opportunity, because you do have a tunnel right near the bus stop that goes across, is there any way to put a path from that tunnel down to your market area?
Yes, we're actually looking at that option as well, Beck. The problem with that is we expect a portion of the folks crossing Highway 101 would likely use that, because you do have to go past the point where you want to get to and back. And so we're really afraid that folks will just continue to cross Highway 101 at the place that they're crossing now. But we are looking at that.
Yeah, because that was my initial thought, was you needed a tunnel, just as Kate had suggested, down at, is it the Longhouse Market, whatever that is.
Yes.
But you said it's at sea level, so you can't put a tunnel at sea level. And the other one, because I wouldn't care walking the extra distance, but I realize I may not be the majority of people.
Right.
But I think it's really exciting to think that you're doing something there. Just as a happenstance, I had that conversation with Sarah earlier this week, because I've been up on the ODT lately, and
Sure.
And I'm going, we really need to be able to get across the road there. So anyway, great news from the Jamestown Slalom Tribe.
Yeah.
And we'll let you comment now.
My turn back?
Yeah, your turn.
Oh, well, Kate beat me to it. Thank you, Kate.
Okay.
We're building, in cooperation with WashDOT, the city of Paulsbo, the first big roundabout on Highway 305, which is that, you all know, that very busy corridor to the Seattle Ferry, right? And the underground tunnel, pedestrian and bicycle, technically for animals too, but I don't think any self-respecting animal is going to want to use it. And so that's really cool. I got a chance to tour it. It's pretty massive, but the nicest part about it, it just doesn't solve a local problem. It's a key connector in that cross Washington, Cascade to Pacific Ocean corridor. Coming off the Seattle Ferry, because Bainbridge is invested in some, and so this will allow folks to safely cross a very busy corridor. So we're pretty excited about it. Should come online by the end of this year already.
Wow, that's
It
great.
also includes wonderful bus stops. Thank you.
Everything's
Also.
there.
Did it.
John, do you want to speak on the transit connection for that same adjacent to the roundabout?
Not really, other than just, we have a lot of transit service that runs that corridor and serves that busy ferry, as Ed mentioned, or referred to it as, but I wouldn't add anything more than that. Ed kind of captured the fact of the nice bus stops that's going to be a part of your project.
Yeah. And just to make a note, John and I were involved in getting publicity last week for a proposed double-decker electric bus connection between Paulsbo and Winslow. It would be an express bus. In addition to the environmental and congestion component, I still dream it'll be a bit of a tourist draw to be properly marketed on the Seattle side. Anything you want to add on the double-decker, John? We got a lot of good publicity.
No, other than I was going to add that, and thank you for bringing that up. I have a few things that kids have been up to. That was one of them. But we're just exploring a variety of technologies, and having a battery electric double deck bus is outstanding as far as our fleet, and demand will certainly help with the environment. So, Ed, if you're finished, I would add more things the kids have.
Please, go for it.
I would just add a couple other things that Kitsap is working on and exploring. We mentioned the electric double-deck bus. We just took delivery of our second electric standard routed coach, and we're pretty impressed with it. We have two of them now. One was manufactured by a company called Proterra, which was the first one. The second one is a company called Gillig. We're very impressed with the Gillig and its performance right now. But as part of that, we're also making some major capital upgrades to one of our operating facilities to put in more bus chargers to be able to support an expanded electric fleet. We're also looking at the technology of inductive charging, which was mentioned earlier with cars. We're going to probably be heading in that direction. We also had an opportunity to look at the hydrogen fuel cell technology. We actually arranged for, we borrowed a bus from our friends down in Palm Springs, and we're able to truck the bus up here, and we had a company provide us a tractor trailer with fuel so that we can operate the bus. And that was pretty impressive to see that technology. And then also I would just add that we kicked off finally the Southworth Fast Ferry route. It's a route that runs from South Kitsap to downtown Seattle. And that was the last of the 3 routes that the voters approved when they approved the Fast Ferry tax measure. And finally, Annette mentioned the project that they're working on for Congressman Kilmer. We are also working on one, we refer to it as the Gorst Corridor. It is improvements to expand and actually improve the corridor to be more resilient during seismic events and global warming. But we've been working hard on that a lot, not Kitsap by himself. There's a coalition of a number of public and private folks that have been working with DOT on upgrade of that. So that's a project that we're submitting to Congressman Kilmer as well. In fact, he's been participating on our coalition for that project. So I think I'll shut up there, and that's kind of what Kitsap Transit's been up to.
Is there anyone else that wants to give us updates for their jurisdiction? Can I put Dennis on the spot, and is there anything we should know from DOT? Or is he there?
I'm here.
There you are.
Just that, you know, with all the talk of all the different funding, you know, things could get really crazy, or it might just stay the same. Who knows? Got a lot of fish passage work coming up. I know that much.
Yep. Is there anything else? Anything else for the good of the order? If not, we can stand adjourned, and we will see everyone in June. And in June, we will be finalizing our UPWP and the public participation protocol. So, and I would also like to remind everyone to expect an invitation to the May 5th subcommittee for bylaw review. Again, I thank everyone for attending. And if the executive committee would please stay on the meeting, I believe Ed has a RTIP for us to take a look at.
This is
Bye.
Rachel. I have a quick question.
Okay.
Am I on the executive committee? I'm not sure.
No, it's just,
okay.
It's the chair, vice chair, and secretary.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so
But
much.
it is for the project in SWIM.
What's that?
But it is for the amendment we're looking at is for the project in SQUIM. Yeah.
On Washington.
Yeah, exciting. All right, everybody have a great day.
Yeah, have a wonderful day, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks, Brandon.
Bye-bye.